Okay, well, we're
bring
going to
'em
get
up, but yeah.
started. So welcome to
I know,
all
there's so
who
many
are
things to remember.
listening in. We are at the end of John chapter 11, and we're going to try to get through 12 and 13. And this is sort of the story, the last bit of the story part before we get into Jesus's big, long 3 chapters of talking to the disciples, which is interesting, but... So we just had Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and that the leaders react poorly to him. So we're in 11 verses starting at 45. If someone wants to read that, the rest of that chapter.
I could start. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the council and said, "What are we to do? This man is performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and destroy both our holy place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You do not understand that it is better for you to have one man die for the people than to have the whole nation destroyed." He did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was about to die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So from that day on, they planned to put him to death. Jesus therefore no longer walked about openly among the Jews, but went from there to a town called Ephraim, in the region near the wilderness, and he remained there with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus and were asking one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? Surely he will not come to the festival, will he?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who knew where Jesus was should let them know, so that they might arrest him. Can we keep going into 12, or?
Sure, because this relates to it.
6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." When the great...
Are we?
Yeah, that's
I just had a comment. And that has always bothered me, that you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. I mean, I know he didn't mean it that way. Like, who cares about the poor?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, and people have interpreted it very poorly, which is frustrating. People have interpreted it as a prescription rather than a description. And so they have used it to basically say we don't have to help the poor.
Right.
And I don't know how you get that from reading everything Jesus has done, but it has... It's meant to be that she's doing something really important, and you can always take care of the poor. In fact, recently somebody said a better translation would have been, "You will always be amongst the poor, but you will not always be amongst me." And so the place of the follower is in the middle of the poor people, whom you are helping all the time.
All the time, yeah.
And the world, she knows, the world is set up in a way where there will probably always be poor people, and there you should be helping them. And so at this moment, though, and I wonder too if this isn't just a classic case of scarcity, where we see someone spending something and we go, well, there's not enough money in the world to both take care of the poor and do something special, right? And so we don't see a beautiful act for what it is, a generous, abundant act. We have but what about, right? That phenomenon.
we always hear it when debates over government funding comes up. It's always, well, we can't spend money on that because we have to take care of this.
Mm-hmm.
When we could be spending money on both of them.
Mm-hmm. There's usually an elephant in the room that's getting a ton of money that doesn't need to, but no one's going to touch that because it's a sacred cow, right? So we argue about the crumbs, who gets the crumbs, rather than, yeah.
Well, talking the elephant in the room there, Judas Iscariot just described him as a thief who was planning to steal some of that money. Is interesting too.
Yeah, and it was mentioned that the only other time Jesus talks about the thief was when he says, I am the gate, I am the good shepherd, the others are thieves and bandits. And then all of a sudden he's described as a thief the next chapter over. So that's kind of interesting.
The fact that this is written after the fact, of course, where the author clearly knows how the story ends, does leave one to wonder if that assertion is true or not. I mean, truly, if you would think that if he was stealing from their coffers, wouldn't he have been found out and outed by now? Or was there, or was Jesus, telling them to just ignore his thievery for the final purpose that was laid out for him? But you have to wonder how much of it is sour grapes, just to
Yeah.
versus how
The truth. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
No, that it definitely could be one of those cases where it's like, oh, we all don't like Judas, so let's make him the bad guy no matter what,
Yeah.
Versus was this actually true? And as mentioned, that concept of a thief may not be literal, but it may be referring to the kind of people who Jesus is warning against, saying, I'm the good shepherd, others are thieves and bandits. So this is almost like a metaphor. But
I
at
suppose
the
know pretty tightly what they meant, taking
Yeah.
the money, but
yeah.
But we know that when they wrote stories back then, they weren't as much chronicles as we expect. They were telling the story to tell us something about the people involved and about people in general. So why does he have to be portrayed as the baddie all the time like this?
Yeah.
Is it to say that even among the highest, most revered of the group, there may be somebody there who's...
Yeah, I also just think it's interesting that I think I lost it. Oh no, you notice this on really bad news commentaries and certain politicians and podcasts where they ignore big things and they talk about little things, and can be very hypocritical, and other people can point it out, but there's a lot of people that don't see it necessarily. And I think that Judas doesn't care about the poor. He just wants to point out and make her feel bad or something, right? Like he has some other agenda, but he's hiding it. And we see this happening a lot with politicians and people where is it a dog whistle? Is that what I'm trying to get at? Where you say something that hits some subconscious belief that people have without actually saying what you mean.
Yeah.
So if, for example, you are wanting to not wanting the police department to be challenged in their funding or have any reforms, you'll say, well, crime will go up, and then everybody feels that subconscious fear, right, of rise of crime. Even if there's no proof or no this or no that, it's just something that immediately makes you feel bad. And so I wonder if Judas, in some way, by saying, oh, the poor, immediately is people's sense of guilt and makes her look bad. And maybe his goal then was to make her look bad. I don't know.
Maybe it's kind of the tension between, we're all trying to figure out how to practice our faith, how to follow Jesus,
Yeah.
and sometimes it can get very performative.
Oh.
I mean, in the Middle Ages, you got the people who went as far as whipping themselves publicly and then putting on hair shirts to make it hurt more.
Yep.
That doesn't really help anything, but it's very visible.
Yeah.
So perhaps Judas in this case is sort of symbolizing that tendency to give the appearance of, oh, we've got to be noble and not spend money on fancy things even for ourselves.
Yeah, he's trying to sound righteous,
Yeah.
but he's missing the big picture. I always like how Jesus reacts to Mary in both Luke and John. The way I see it is Mary does the weird things. She does the uncomfortable things that makes everybody go, girl, what are you doing? And Jesus gets her. And so that's one reason why I love that friendship that they have is she comes and does this uncomfortable, expensive, generous thing. And he's like, I see what you're doing here, when everyone else is like, your sister's being weird again. And so I really appreciate that. Should we keep going? Someone else want to read?
I can take the next one.
Before you gotta run?
Yeah,
Right.
before I gotta run. Let's see. So, verse 9.
Mm-hmm.
When the great crowd of the Jews learned that he was there, they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and were believing in Jesus. The next day, the great crowd that had come to the festival heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is the name of he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel. Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it is written, Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. Look, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt. His disciples did not understand these things at first. But when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things had been written of him and had been done to him. So the crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to testify. It was also because they heard he had performed this sign that the crowd went to meet him. The Pharisees then said to one another, You see, you can do nothing. Look, the world has gone after him. Continue on.
Mm-hmm.
Now among those who went up to worship at the festival were some Greeks. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida and Galilee, and said to him, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip went and told Andrew. Then Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. Jesus answered them, The hour is come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life loses it, and those who hate their lives in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, there will my servant be also. Whoever serves me, the Father will honor.
Okay. The line, whoever loves their life loses it, whoever hates their life in this world. The best explanation I heard of that was he's trying to get through the concept of sort of like the ego self, where like I want the wealth and the power and the things that make me feel worthy, but that often lead to unhappiness and big problems in the world. If that is what you're working so hard to keep, you've lost the plot, like you've lost the big thing. But if you're willing to give all that up, you're going to find the real life underneath. You're going to find what your soul really longs for. So he says this in most of the Gospels in a different way. And he's speaking of himself here, but he's speaking of all of us too, right? That Yeah. What are we afraid to let die? All right, keep going.
Okay. Now my soul is troubled. And what should I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it is for this reason that I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven. I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. The crowd standing there heard it, and said that it was thunder. Others said, an angel has spoken to him. Jesus answered, this voice has come for your sake, not for mine. Now is the judgment of the world, and now the ruler of this world will be driven out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. He said this to indicate the kind of death he was to die. The crowd answered him, we have heard from the law that the Messiah remains forever. How can you say that the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is the Son of Man? Jesus answered them, the light is with you for a little longer. Walk while you have the light, so the darkness may not overtake you. If you walk in the darkness, you do not know where you are going. While you have the light, believe in the light, so that you may become children of the light. After Jesus had said this, he departed and hid from them. Although he had performed so many signs in their presence, they did not believe him. This was to fulfill the words spoken by the prophet Isaiah. Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? And so they could not believe, because Isaiah had also said, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts. And turned the page. So that they might not look with their eyes and understand with their heart and turn, so I would heal them. Isaiah said this because he saw his glory and spoke about him. Nevertheless, many even of the authorities believed in him. But because the Pharisees, they did not confess it for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue, for they loved human glory more than the glory that comes from God.
Yeah, that's sort of what Jesus was talking about. Those who love their life lose it. Those who hate their life will keep it. The Pharisees in power, they have a lot to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard for people in positions of power and privilege to be the ones willing to risk it for change. Usually it's people who have nothing to lose
Yeah.
are the ones who are more likely to see things first and speak up first. Yeah.
Yeah, having a lot to lose can blind you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A quote from Isaiah reminds me of a quote from The Little Prince. It was, one doesn't see properly with the eyes, but with the heart. Or one sees properly with the heart. The essential is hidden to the eyes. Right, invisible to the eyes. That's, yeah. The original English translation isn't very accurate, so that's why I'm trying to
Sure.
process it. But that's a really good book.
Yeah.
Never shoot it.
The Isaiah passage is quoted a couple times, and it feels strange because it's like almost seems like God is intentionally blinding some people for some reason. And some people may say, oh, it's because Jesus has to die on the cross. Well, I don't know. Does he? In a lot of ways, we can see this throughout history. People who were such powerful leaders who spoke about peace and love usually ended up dying. It's kind of miraculous when they don't end up dying by the authorities, because that kind of message is always threatening.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just seems like Jesus' death was just going to happen no matter what. But this is how John understood this. He says there are people who wanted to put Jesus to death, would not believe and understand it. And guess what? Isaiah predicted it. So that makes sense.
It kind of ties into the Passover imagery too, because go way back into Exodus, and you get that imagery there too, where Pharaoh's heart is hardened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do they have to go through all these plagues? Why did he?
Mm-hmm.
Because it looks like he might have been willing,
Exactly.
but no, God made him not be willing.
Exactly.
So why?
Yep. Yeah, you have sometimes Pharaoh hardened his heart, and sometimes God hardens his heart so that. And that's just how they understood it.
Yeah.
Maybe that,
Maybe it's just the way they understood things, but
Mm-hmm.
I think there's also some sort of message in there too that, sometimes when somebody is being a bit of a jerk to you, it's not entirely their fault.
Mm.
It's not entirely because they're, don't hate them for it necessarily.
Mm. Mm.
And it might be too that the intention was for the Israelites to have to go through a bit more a bit more strife in their 40-year journey, or approximate, or whatever, a very long journey before they get to Israel, so that they would appreciate the freedom that they got. That it wouldn't be just handed to them.
Like, if the lesson's too easy, it won't take it.
Yeah.
Mm.
If they too easily corrupted, they won't be willing to see it for the gift that it was, and that someone would come over and take control of it and corrupt it. But
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta go practice.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing you sing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Christy, do
Okay.
you want to take over?
44. Then Jesus cried aloud, "Whoever believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. And whoever sees me sees him who sent me. I have come as light into the world, so that everyone who believes in me should not remain in the darkness. I do not judge anyone who hears my words and does not keep them. For I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. The one who rejects me and does not receive my word has a judge. On the last day, the word that I have spoken will serve as judge. For I have not spoken on my own, but the Father who sent me has himself given me a commandment about what to say and what to speak. And I know that his commandment is eternal life. What I speak, therefore, I speak just as the Father has told me." Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and would go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash, except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen. But it is to fulfill the scripture, the one who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I tell you this now before it occurs, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he. Very truly I tell you, whoever receives one whom I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me."
Have any of you participated in a foot washing on Monday, Thursday?
We did I don't remember. I don't think it was on Monday, Thursday, but we did do one when Scott was pastor.
Okay.
Okay.
Just
I
once.
missed it.
Okay. Yeah. Usually it's really hard to do that as a whole congregation because people won't do it.
Yeah, they just had a few people that contacted
Exactly.
ahead of time.
But it's interesting because the reason they won't do it is actually the power of the deal. When I was in seminary and we were doing a worship class, we were going through the seasons, and our professor, when we got to Monday, Thursday, had us all get up, and then he washed our feet. And then afterwards asked us what it was like, and I mean, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because here was the 65-year-old, professor that we revered and thought so well of, and he's touching your bare feet and looking at you, and it feels so vulnerable.
There's a weird intimacy to it.
There is.
You
It's
know, it's-
intimate and it's vulnerable, and you're also seeing someone, do a servant role. And that's exactly the point.
Right.
And Peter doesn't want that vulnerability and intimacy and the role reversal. And Jesus is like, but you have to accept that to get the faith. To get what I'm trying to is that there's a level of vulnerability, intimacy, and role reversal in this faith. And I think we still struggle with that. Yeah.
I always smile at that part because Peter goes immediately goes, "Oh, so this is a purification ritual. Well, then purify all of me.
Yeah.
I just got to show how good I am and how
Yeah.
enthusiastic I am for this." When he's completely missing the point of it.
Yep.
It's not a purification ritual. Like I said, you're already clean.
Yep. Very clean. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be so awkward, not only to have either way. Like, I don't like feet, so I mean that doesn't help. But
Yeah.
to want to wash someone else's feet is just so gross, and then to let someone wash yours, it's tough.
Yeah.
I think we're going to do a simulated, I'll get a couple volunteers and we'll do that for this Monday, Thursday, because it is a really
It is a good thing.
powerful thing
Yeah.
to do. Just like when you act out the woman coming, Mary, in this particular story, letting her hair down and washing the oil with her
Yeah.
feet. To act that out, it gets uncomfortable fast
gosh,
too.
yeah.
It's kind of interesting that Jesus is like, this is a great idea. I'm going to do this with my disciples.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. That he got the idea from watching her do it
Maybe.
and setting it right after that too.
It's right
Maybe
after
the point
that.
they were making.
Yeah, she anoints his feet, and then he's like, oh, I'm going to do this with my disciples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And using her hair too is just. I'm
Yeah.
sure that amped up the discomfort factor for people watching because that's way more submissive and intimate.
Intimate. I'm pretty
Like even
sure.
a slave wouldn't use their hair; they'd use a towel.
No. I'm pretty sure
They
that
wouldn't want the
women.
slave's hair touching their feet.
Yeah. Women would cover their hair in that culture, and
Oh, yeah.
that the only person who saw your hair would be the person you're married to. So to be uncovered and to use your hair in that way would have been very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it so great.
That and the grossness. Like, to me, I think that is so gross. Like, to get someone's foot, dirt in my hair. But that again is also the point. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if my hair gets dirty. It matters that I'm showing that I can be a servant to others. Like, that part is what gets me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did they have foot washing rituals like the Muslims do in that area back then? So by like 700 they would have around that part of the world where your feet need to be clean before you go in anywhere, and that Muslims still practice that today around the world, even though most people wear shoes now instead of just sandals. Because your feet would be gross
Yeah,
with sandals
so
around a
disgusting.
dusty area. With
Yeah.
socks and shoes, they're a lot better.
This is the note I have. It was ordinary hospitality to offer guests water to wash their feet. After a journey in sandals on dusty roads, a host was not expected to wash his guests' feet for them, but a slave might be assigned to wash his guests' feet for them.
Okay.
Or disciples might wash their teacher's feet. And then it says the dialogue following may transform the foot washing into a symbol of baptism. On the other hand, the foot washing may represent Jesus' death for the disciples. Anyway, there's a lot of symbolism in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, should I keep going? All right, are we on 21?
Yes.
Okay. After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, "Very truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. Why would they have been uncertain if they already knew that Judas was bad?
They must not have known yet.
I don't
They
think that
didn't.
They did.
Okay, this is
No.
John saying it
Yeah.
after. Okay.
Yeah.
One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said, "Do quickly what you are going to do." No one at the table knew why he had said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what we need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered, "Where I am going you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times.
It's easy to say it.
Yep.
Hard to do it.
And he probably even meant it.
Oh, I'm
Thought
sure
he
he
would
did.
do it. He
Yeah.
he was 100% in. You can just see Peter like he's
He's
this.
just like full of passion and
Yeah.
faith tonight.
And he does wind up doing it. He does wind up getting crucified and dying. So somehow he didn't have that. He wasn't ready yet or something. I don't know. I guess he didn't have the spirit yet at that point.
Yeah, the mystery of the disciple whom Jesus loved is
Yeah.
a very interesting debate. There's
Yeah.
4 possibilities. One is that it's John,
Yep.
the gospel for whom this is named after. Another theory is that it's Lazarus, because it says, "See how he loved him," and there's references earlier of Jesus loving Lazarus.
But he's not named as one of the 12 disciples. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
But he is present here, and only in this version. I don't remember any other telling of this that
Yeah.
he's there, but
Lazarus only exists in the Gospel of John.
yeah.
The third option, you have to do a gender switch, but that it's Mary Magdalene, because she is historically 100% the most rockin' follower of Jesus. And in the early church, she was well regarded as the powerhouse of the apostles. And she was downgraded in importance over time. And
Is
so
that where the whole thing comes in then? That they were in love and they were married? If she's the one that he loves?
possibly, and then there's a lot of other writings that didn't make it in the Bible that were really well known for hundreds of years in the early church. And when they mention followers, Mary Magdalene is always one of them, as is Peter. And she was present, and often Jesus would teach her separately, which apparently Peter was mad about. And one of the phrases says, like, whom the master kissed on the mouth. And so people thought it could be literal or it could be metaphorical, meaning intimacy, meaning he's passing on something to her that's really deep and profound. So there's like ambiguity. Is it literal or is it not literal? Does it matter?
Does it matter? Yeah.
Yep. The fourth option of who the one Jesus loves is that it's us. We're supposed to put ourselves in the story. That we are reclining next to Jesus's breast, and that is a symbol of intimacy, because that's pretty intimate when you're cuddling with Jesus. So, yeah, those are the different things people have thought of.
I always just assumed it was common knowledge and accepted that it was John. Like the disciple Jesus loved, that's John. But I guess that's just because that's what I was taught. So who knows?
Yeah, anytime something isn't like super explicit, there's usually people who are digging, kind of like archaeology. They're biblically digging to say, okay, but is that really true? What do other non-biblical sources at the same time, what might they have said? You know, what are other, so.
You wonder how many sources got lost when the Romans swept through 70 years later, or 40, depending on when this actually happened.
Yeah.
That's also an argument. What year was this taking place in?
Well, the biggest purge was after Constantine, when he basically gathered. It's really interesting if you guys are doing the Women of the Bible, the last lesson on the women of the early church. I did a lot of research, and it was kind of shocking to really understand that for the first 300 years there was a huge variety and diversity of Christianity, and yet amidst all of them you had multiple figures of Jesus, Peter, Mary Magdalene, Philip. Like there were some consistent characters who were there, Mary, Martha, like over and over and over again. And as wide of the variety of teachings were, there are also women dominated in leadership in the early church. So much that people were making fun of Christianity because it was a bunch of educated women leading, and how stupid was that? So what happened in the 300s? Constantine got all the male bishops together, excluded any of female leadership, and said we need to define Christianity, give it a lot of money and power, and also figure out what's going to be in the Bible. Well, and anything that didn't fit the narrative that they wanted was gotten rid of. So there were huge purges of scripture that just didn't happen to fit the narrative. And that's why I say it's amazing. The fact that Jesus comes off as liberal as he is in all four of these gospels, and the way he talks and treats to women, is probably just the tip of the iceberg of the early Christian church, because they would have kept what kind of fit and what they thought was acceptable, but there was all this other stuff that was probably even more radical. And that's what I find really fascinating, is like the Bible wasn't more liberal than Jesus. It's probably the other way around, right?
Very likely.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely changed a lot when Christianity was legalized.
Yes.
Because then the Romans made it. Well, yeah, Constantine was the emperor. He could declare that this shall be the way. But he was raised a Roman, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was heavily influenced by Augustine, who was not from a strict Jewish tradition. He was a Manichaeist, I think. Manichaeism?
Yes. Good memory. I think so.
So, a dualistic view of the world, good and evil, and also very
He had issues with women.
male-dominated.
Yeah. He had big issues with women.
Very.
He was probably somewhat misogynistic.
I think we can kind of blame him for a lot of the emphasis on
Original.
not just male leadership, but also absolutely no women.
Yeah. Because his final gift, Augustine, was when he finally was able to accept chastity. That was his freedom from women, because he was kind of addicted to, probably sexually addicted to, women, and so he saw them as temptresses to him personally, and that theology,
Totally their
his personal story, was turned into a theology that really dominated Western Christian understanding of sin and women and sex and bodies, and yeah. I mean, he has a pretty profound story, but he was not God, right? And,
No.
But that we don't often always realize where our theologies come from, and how we can link them to specific people who had really important things to say, but they were subject to their time and their issues and their...
Was he the one that was in that garden and had that big...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember learning about him.
He wasn't an entirely horrible person, but
No.
definitely didn't like women.
Right, right.
Or liked them too much and then hated them because of it.
Yeah. No, he
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Was addicted to them in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It is interesting that, we have the 12 male disciples, and yet we're hinted that there's more than that. And in Luke, he really gives us much better. He's like, oh, and then there's Mary Magdalene and these women who used to follow and provide for him. But I'm just going to mention it there and then leave it. Although in Acts we get, which Luke also wrote, we get way more evidence too of the women.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think it was tip of the iceberg type of stuff of what was really happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really good Bible study to read the last couple lessons. Very eye-opening.